Handhelds have seen quite a renaissance in the last 5 to 7 years, and handheld enthusiasts have had a wide range of devices to engage with across all the different platforms. The Nintendo Switch has provided incredible experiences, despite its lower spec using modified NVIDIA Tegra X1 chips from over a decade ago. We see games from their first-party studios continue to impress despite the pared-back visual fidelity. PC enthusiasts within the last 4 years have had a wide range of devices just in their own subset of the market, with handhelds like the Steam Deck, the Asus ROG Ally, the Lenovo Legion Go, the Logitech G Cloud, and many more, which have allowed them to expand their PC library far beyond the mouse and keyboard and take it with them wherever they want, using custom AMD chips, or in some cases with the MSI Claw, using custom Intel APUs. PlayStation saw their own handheld in the PlayStation Portal release last year, which is a streaming-only device similar to the Logitech G Cloud that allows you to play your PlayStation 5 games across your home network, or in some cases play them far beyond the means of your own home, though with some incredible internet required. And while Xbox hasn't seen its own dedicated hardware, we've seen Microsoft enter into partnerships with the likes of Asus and others to engage with its core audience that's both on console and PC, using its cloud-saving functionality and its cross-platform Play Anywhere capabilities of the service when engaging with something like a handheld PC device such as the Asus ROG Ally or the GPD Win. All of these can engage with Game Pass and engage with its features, so in some ways it is a de facto Xbox handheld, although having no direct involvement with Microsoft. But all of this is the past. We've already seen all these devices come and go, but what about the future? What is the future of handheld gaming? And how is new technology going to allow handhelds to sort of punch above their weight and further expand their gaming experiences to be more like traditional consoles and less like pared down versions like we've seen in the past? Well, starting from a perspective of what's most likely to release in the quickest amount of time, Nintendo's Switch 2 is reportedly supposed to release next year. And while the specs of the device aren't known, reporting suggests that the performance of the device is going to be closer to, say, a PS4 or an Xbox One, though I expect this estimate is actually on the lower end of what we'll actually see from the handheld. It's reported that both AMD and Nvidia are bidding to Nintendo in order to gain their business and to supply chips for the handheld. And both of these manufacturers have key technologies that allow their chips to perform in much better scenarios than, say, the raw rasterization and rendering capabilities that they're capable of. Technology like AMD's Fluid Motion Frames, which is now available on the Asus ROG Ally, or Nvidia's FrameGen, or technologies like FSR3 and DLSS3 that allow upscaling from lower resolutions that can dramatically improve image clarity and frame rates. I suspect that despite what is suggested to be a last generation console performance profile in the Switch 2, I expect that we'll see a lot better performance than being suggested, all because of these technologies sort of synergistically working to produce better outputs for gamers. But even if you assume that isn't the case, and that Nintendo is simply going to release another handheld with a much lower spec than its competitors, I don't think it's going to necessarily be a hindrance. We've already seen that with its slate of games that Nintendo is able to deliver high-quality gameplay experiences on its device, even despite the hardware limitations. My only hope for the Switch is that we see an integration of more modern social features connected to the platform. Things like achievements, online parties, and connectivity that doesn't require to use a phone app, and allows the experience of playing on Nintendo consoles to become a bit more modern in their implementation, much like the other platforms. Now for Xbox, it's a bit of a different story. There are reports that their next generation consoles aren't simply going to be like the Xbox One or the Xbox 360, but rather much more similar to something like the Xbox Series consoles, where a traditional Series X-like device will be the main console that is the most powerful and offers the best experience, and that a lower spec Series S-like device will be less of a lower spec traditional console and more like a handheld. And we even see from recent reporting that recent device classifications from Korea that a new Xbox dev kit has been sent to developers in Korea, which means that it's likely elsewhere as well. And while this could simply be their long-rumored digital Xbox, I think it's more likely this is one of their next-generation console devices. Reporting suggests that these will launch in 2026, which is potentially just shy of 3 years from now. As I mentioned before, Xbox already sort of has a foothold in the handheld market, but it's less direct involvement, but more akin to how it engages with Windows devices. Plenty of computer manufacturers manufacture Windows-based systems, and Microsoft has no involvement with them outside of selling OEM keys or selling licenses to their OS for these manufacturers to develop these devices. But all the customers that engage with those devices are Windows users, and Microsoft sees a benefit from that. And in a similar way, purchasers of, say, Windows-based handhelds like the Lenovo Legion Go or the Asus ROG Ally also engage with Windows, and considering what the device is for, gaming on the go, it's likely they engage with Game Pass. Still, I think consumers would be much more excited about something that's a de facto Xbox handheld with a similar OS to, say, the Series consoles and a much more tailored experience to playing games on a handheld for the Xbox platform than, say, another manufacturer making a Windows-based system that you can engage with Xbox Game Pass with in a less direct way, where you're getting less of a tailor-made experience for playing on that platform. with all of the benefits of a custom Xbox OS and full integration with Game Pass in your game library, would be a much more exciting proposition to, say, the already existing Windows-based handhelds. For PlayStation, we saw last year with the launch of the PlayStation Portal that they entered back into the handheld market after having been away for so long with the likes of the PlayStation Vita. And while the PlayStation Portal wasn't very exciting for me personally, as I find streaming to be a less engaging and less fun experience to, say, running the games natively, it certainly did see a market, and we saw with interviews from Steven Totillo on his GameFile newsletter with PlayStation's VP of Product Management, Hiromi Wakai, quote, "Although we don't have any numbers to share, the demand has continued to exceed our expectations. Despite its cost of $200 and the ability for it to just stream games from your PlayStation, did find a market and did see success, though I think that has more to do with a better forecasted and constrained production quantity than, say, something like the PlayStation VR, which we've also recently seen has stopped production as they try to move through their already stockpiled inventory of devices." And while the PlayStation Portal does have a lot going for it, in the way of full DualSense integration, and a pretty comparable experience to, say, playing PlayStation 5 natively on the console, it simply isn't what I think a lot of people are looking for when they think of a new handheld from Sony. Personally, I want to play games natively rendered. Streaming continues to offer a compromised experience to something that's natively rendered. And while I don't expect we'll get a handheld that can actually play games one-to-one to the PS4 and PS5 counterparts with regards to performance and fidelity, I'm willing to sacrifice image clarity or even frame rate to play these games on the go. And for a new handheld device from Sony, it needs to be firmly established in the realm of, say, the Steam Deck or the other PC handhelds, where they don't play new bespoke versions of your existing library, but rather play the existing games, but at lower resolutions and lower frame rates. Part of what made the original Vita a hard sell for consumers and developers, and ultimately contributed to its failure, developers weren't simply translating existing games from PS3 or PS4 to the device and then selling them again. Now, that certainly was the case for some games, but for the vast majority, these were native PS Vita ports, which means that developers had to develop entirely new versions of games, or in some cases, create entirely new projects altogether. Games like Killzone Mercenary, Resistance Liberation, these weren't PS3 games that were simply ported over to PS Vita. These were entirely new titles specifically made for the PS Vita. Part of why I think the success of the Switch has been so meteoric is because Nintendo isn't asking itself or its other third-party developers to make new games for the Switch in the same way that they might have made new games on the DS or 3DS versus something like, say, a native Wii, Wii U, or GameCube version. Developers for the Switch simply make one version of the game, and it's potentially able to be run at a high resolution while docked, but it's not asking its developers to have to make entirely new versions of games. And we've already seen something like this on the Steam Deck, where Cyberpunk has its own Steam Deck setting profile, so simply selecting that will tune your settings to play the game on Steam Deck to what CDPR feels are the best settings for the best experience on that device. There have been leaks about the Vita 2 being currently in development at Sony, and while it's not been officially greenlit yet, Sony has ordered custom APU chips from AMD in order to continue to develop a device that may potentially be Sony's next handheld, and reporting from Moore's Law's Dead, who originally broke this story, suggests that the device is more likely to be a PlayStation 6 companion device, similar to something like the Steam Deck. Personally, the idea of this device is quite exciting. I would love nothing more than to be able to play my PlayStation library, but have it natively be rendered, or similarly, when visiting family or friends, to be able to take a device like this on the plane, where I know that it's less about my internet connection and more about what game I want to play as the device runs the game. And with all the advancements we've seen with AMD's 7000 and 8000 series APUs, and the continued advancement of things like frame generation technology and dynamic upscaling, I think something like this makes a lot of sense for Sony, and is actually much more likely than I think most people realize. And even with something like PlayStation's PSSR upscaling technology, I think this lends further support and credence to the idea that Sony is developing a handheld, but it's simply going to be an extension of the PlayStation experience, and less of its own unique device with its own unique games. And I think this is the most successful option for Sony if it wants to launch a new handheld, which it's been trepidatious about doing up until now. And for PC, we continue to see further developments that we've sort of always been seeing from them. Windows-based ultra-mobile PCs have been around since 2006 when Microsoft was involved with something like Project Origami, which natively ran Windows Vista. These devices have continued to proliferate with the release of handheld PCs from GPD, Aya Neo, from the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG Ally, with the Lenovo Legion Go, and even the MSI Claw, which released recently. PC continues to see further advancements and further development of its mobile handheld PC market. And while it's certainly not as big as what Nintendo does with the Switch, I think it offers a compelling alternative to people who simply don't want to sit at their desk to play games. Valve recently released its Steam Deck OLED model. We know it's continuing to work on advancements in this space and developing a Steam Deck 2, but we know it's years away as they want to make sure that the second generation Steam Deck is a substantial jump from the first one. Additionally, we know that Asus is continuing to work on a second generation ROG Ally. The ROG Ally did have some problems at launch with the SD card reader issues and some less than ideal BIOS updates. It still is a pretty interesting alternative to what is the Steam Deck, as it natively does run Windows. And we see with something like Lenovo Legion Go, where it does have detachable controllers like the Switch, but is a mouse sensor that allows you to use the handheld controller as a mouse pointer. And while the performance of the MSI Claw has been disappointing, it still is interesting and promising to see that Intel supplied chips for this handheld. We continue to see new variations and more innovation in this space in the PC market, And I think we'll continue to see that going forward with a lot of different devices and a lot of different manufacturers. I think part of the reason the handheld market is seeing a renaissance as of late is because low TDP, high performance AMD APUs are allowing what used to be rather expensive PC devices to become much cheaper and much more attractive alternatives to what would be something like a Nintendo console. People have these established libraries across all these different platforms. Wanting to be able to play them on the go, I think, is a natural inclination for a lot of gamers. And for a lot of them, they're simply waiting for the right device. And I think over the next few years, we'll look back and see what GPD, Aya, and the Steam Deck have sort of continued to develop as the beginning of what was a reignition of the handheld market, much beyond what Nintendo has dominated in the past. That's going to do it for me, guys. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.